Carolina gold rice was a cornerstone of the colonial economy, once called the golden seed because it was such an important crop. Carolina gold rice actually happens to trace its lineage back to that African strain of rice rather through the Asian line. It's got a distinct flavor profile from most rice that you might pick up in the grocery store.
Unfortunately, can't have this discussion without talking about the people and the companies that love Black ideas but don't want to credit and pay Black people.
Sometimes we may forget within our communities that our ideas are property. It's your intellectual property, and you must protect it in the same way you would protect your physical property. In the case of AI can be used to help you strategize and organize and come up with unique ways to fight back against things that are literally coming for you.
Welcome, friends and family, fighters of all ages. This is round 5 of Seasoned Fighters, a show where we step into the ring with champions of social change so we can learn the art of fighting back. And in the blue corner, we have the founder of Siwani Enterprises, who blends Gullah Geechee heritage with technical expertise to build spirits that honor the past and tech tools that empower the future. She's also the one who shared her recipe for this lovely peach and thyme old fashioned, which she's also drinking.
Cheers.
Please, everybody, welcome our next fighter, Camylle Coley. Camylle, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
You know, I'm a really big foodie who firmly believes that food is political. And one area of food culture with a very rich and complicated history is spirits. And you happen to be one of a handful of folks in the world distilling spirits using Carolina gold rice. So before we dive into the politics and the history of this industry, can you set the stage by sharing with us the significance and the history of Carolina gold rice?
Yeah, so I can share in general and then I'll share about myself specifically. So Carolina gold rice was a cornerstone of the colonial economy. It was once called the golden seed because it was such an important crop, particularly in South Carolina and Georgia in the time of the 16 and 1700s, to bring money to the colonies and to the colonies being able to sustain themselves. And the reason why it's so significant aside from that is that the only way that they were able to produce that rice is with the brain power and manpower of enslaved Africans from the Rice Coast or the West Coast of Africa. So the Rice Coast basically extends from Nigeria all the way down to Angola and all the coastal countries in between, as well as some central locations, including Congo and Niger. So this is primarily where folks that were brought over here to work those rice plantations, they predominantly came from those areas. So what has happened is that over the years, those people became who are called the Gullah Geechee people. And the reason for that is that this very specific group of people over centuries were the ones to maintain West African culture, West African-based language, food, religion, all of that. And they are predominantly on what are called the Sea Islands from from southern North Carolina to northern Florida. So Wilmington, North Carolina to Jacksonville, or sometimes folks include St. Augustine, Florida. And we found that, so I found over time, as I was growing up, that I had a direct connection with this rice. My father mentioned over and over as I was growing up that his family considered themselves Geechee. And I didn't really understand what that meant as I was growing up. But what I learned ultimately is that's the reason why we have rice at just about every meal. That's the reason why he is so tied to the ocean um, and has a deep, almost soul level love for seafood. It's those connections that those people have and had that that came straight through him into me. And so as I learned about Carolina Gold rice, its connections to the Gullah Geechee people, my own connections to the Gullah Geechee people, I felt compelled to bring forward a product that um, gives me a reason to talk about them and to speak about them with pride, because they are such an important part of the fabric of this country, but also, to millions of Black people who came through those very states can trace their roots back to.
And I definitely want to go dive into the history, but first I want to talk a little bit more about the spirits in particular. As a amateur gardener, I've grown a profound appreciation for the way that farmers not only grow their crops, but also how they transform their produce to make products and beverages and home cooked meals. But I'm only capable of doing this on like a small scale at my home. But you're taking an ancient grain, turning that into a delicious spirit. So can you tell us in simple terms, how do you turn rice into spirits, and what makes Carolina Gold rice in that process so unique?
Well, what's pretty unique in particular about the Carolina Gold rice grain is its flavor profile. So it's got a distinct flavor profile from most rice that you might pick up in the grocery store. Just to add a little additional historical note, there are two key strains of rice, and they generate from two continents, Asia and Africa. And so the Carolina Gold rice actually happens to trace its lineage back to that African strain of rice rather through the Asian line. And there are actually some research articles that suggest that there are Africans in Central Africa making their own spirits from rice as well. So that's something that I personally am interested in diving more into over time. But essentially what we do is we use a process that's very similar to any other American whiskey. We create a mash. A mash is just basically cooking the rice down almost till it's like soup, to break down all of those cells and all of the things that make up that rice grain. And then because rice is primarily starch instead of sugar, we've elected to keep our spirits very specific to the Carolina Gold rice profile. So in our case, we don't add any other grains to assist with fermentation. What we do is we add an enzyme that breaks those starches down into sugars, and that's what allows us to ferment using yeast. This is distinctly different from Asian styles of making rice whiskey or rice spirits. Those spirits are predominantly fermented with something called koji, which is something other than yeast. It's another thing in that family, but not. So in that case, koji would break down all of the starches in the rice so that the sugars could be fermented. In our case, because we're using that enzyme, we're just using regular yeast, just like you would use to make a traditional American whiskey. And fermenting that way, we use a pot still to do our distillation. The process ends up being what is similar to a triple distillation because of how we run that process. And then in the case of Silva, let it rest and put it into bottles. So let it rest in stainless steel and then put it into bottles. And then in the case of Clue, it goes to rest in cognac barrels that we source from France. And there's reason for that too. One thing I want to get through is that everything that I've elected to do is very intentional. There's not a lot of just throwing stuff together in this case. So like, we specifically chose cognac barrels, not only because after doing some testing, it tasted really good. There's a direct connection between Black culture and cognac. And the reason for that is from Black fighters in France during World Wars I and II. And my grandfather, who's where the Geechee line goes through, is a veteran from World War II. So Clue is named after him.
We unfortunately can't have this discussion without talking about the people and the companies that love Black ideas but don't want to credit and pay Black people. From Uncle Nearest of Jack Daniels to Mr. Tenderism of today, Black culture and innovation continues to be appropriated while the originators get erased. As someone in this space, what lessons do you think we can learn from this colonial tale as old as time?
So from my perspective, and so I have a background beyond the spirits industry that goes to working in aerospace and defense, and specifically in acquisition. And so acquisition, those are the people that are the buyers. And we talk a lot about, in that world, we talk a lot about the protection of intellectual property. And so one of the things that I think sometimes, not always, but sometimes we may forget within our communities is that our ideas are property. It's your intellectual property, and you must protect it in the same way you would protect your physical property. So before I even had liquid to sell, I was down the path with getting my trademarks and all of that. So as of October of last year, my logo, my tagline, and my name are all registered trademarks with the USPTO. And I think on top of that, in my case, it's about also protecting recipes. And so you protect that with contracts and paperwork, which is the boring side of stuff, but is foundational to us being able to protect our communities and build that economic moat. The economic moat is not just about having businesses that can, produce billions of dollars right away. It's also about us protecting our own content, our own IP from people that really just want to use it to make a dollar off of it and really don't care about our outcomes. I think that cooperative economics and looking for ways to keep dollars within our communities, working together, high tides raise all ships. This is how we protect our communities and create that economic moat.
Now, speaking of innovation and technology, I want to talk about a really controversial subject within progressive spaces, and that's artificial intelligence. AI is everywhere. It is negatively impacting our environment, and data center development is displacing communities around the country. But at the same time, there's this conversation where AI is a new tool and technology that some of us have to use in our jobs. Other times we don't have a choice because our industries are relying on AI tools. And sometimes it's a more affordable solution, especially if you're a small business. So as a technologist who acknowledges the benefits and the impact of AI, how do you even begin to define this notion, this notion of ethical AI? Can you and should you use AI for good?
So from my perspective, again, coming from a technical background and is where there's tech available, even if you're not going to use it, you need to learn it because either you're going to use it or or you're going to be used by it. So you need to understand exactly how it works, what kind of information is being collected, who it's being collected from, and you need to understand what the technological impacts will mean to environmental and social justice concerns. So we know that there is a tendency for when, you know, this country finds some new innovation to destroy our communities as a way to make way for that. And the way to protect against that is to become educated on exactly what that tech is and what it means to your community, and using that tech to do that. So in the case of AI can be used to help you strategize and organize and come up with unique ways to fight back against things that are literally coming for you. And I think we do ourselves a disservice if we just say, get rid of it, I don't want to deal with it, and we end up behind. And that's not how we grow. That's not how we create, sort of bulletproof communities. We have to be willing to um, use these new tools to our benefit, just like anybody else's. If we're not, everybody else around us will be, and we'll be left behind. We should be looking at how we can use it to our benefit as well.
One of the things I really appreciate about your business as well is the thoughtfulness, as you said, in protecting Siwani Enterprises. And one concept that you brought up earlier that I love for you to sort of dive into a little bit more is this idea of economic moats. So can you lay out like what are economic moats? How can small businesses use these tools to serve and support their people?
So yeah, an economic moat essentially is the time in which a certain group has between where they are and everybody else catching up with or overtaking them. And so the larger your moat, the more you're protected. And you can build that economic moat with money. You can build it by protecting your IP through businesses, coalition, etc. But you use the moat to measure the health of the community, the health of the business or the organization. I think that AI, because of its utility, is a way to democratize, small business development, democratize strategy, um, lower the barrier of entry for communities to address challenges. And all of those things extend the moat, right? So again, it kind of goes back to, um, you know, by using artificial intelligence, we're able to use it for our benefit, right? It shouldn't, in fact, be a thing where you're just using it to make a random image. I think that's part of what ethical AI is especially as a user, is, how am I using this? Am I using this as actually as a tool? Am I using it just when I need it? Not just for random, I want to entertain myself today. And I think if people kind of shift their perspective from like this just random sort of like new uh video game almost to like, this is something that I can use to help me in my work. I think that perspective helps to bring us to more ethical usage and also towards creating that economic moat.
Now, staying on the topic of the spirits industry, you have firsthand experience with the journey of starting a business from seed to bottle, which means from the business side, you've seen it all. And one of the things that you've mentioned is that Black people are being blocked out of the spirits industry because of the weaponization of language. Can you explain like what is going on and how are these people being pushed out?
I wouldn't say that language is necessarily being used to push people out. I think there are other things that are being used to push people out. But I think what language does is creates an unnecessary barrier to entry to the industry. So there might be someone who's very interested, but then they get put off because they've had an experience where someone makes them feel less than for how they described a wine or a gin or a whiskey, because they didn't use the industry terms. And essentially what I aim to do is level that playing field as well. I don't really care how you describe it. How you describe it, I mean, everybody's palate is different. I don't really care how you describe it, but maybe we can use something like AI, for example, to help, again, level that playing field and have a translator, right? So there's all of these specific names and words and there's flavor wheels, all these kinds of things you can actually buy too that people use to study specific words to describe a whiskey. So for example, my whiskey was described by the Bartenders Association as waxy. What does that mean? What does that mean to the layperson who's not part of the industry, who's just a consumer, right? Just a customer, not even just, but somebody who is a customer and wants to connect with what they're drinking, as most people do today. How can they connect with something so obscure like that? And it turns out waxy just means sort of like scotch-like and aged very long, you know? And so I intend to put out an app, as you discussed, that allows people to put in, this is what I'm tasting, and align it with, the industry words, and vice versa. Say they read some industry words, it relays those words, it defines those words in lay terms.
Now, shifting over to Gullah Geechee people specifically, I think one of the really big reasons why Siwani matters so much is that you're fighting against the tides of cultural erasure, because for many years people couldn't even buy Carolina Gold rice, let alone drink spirits distilled from it. And now you're making a product that can not only start a conversation, but you're raising awareness about an ongoing problem that is still impacting these people today. So can you tell us what is happening to the Gullah Geechee people in their communities, and explain how products like the ones that you're making at Siwani are helping to preserve this culture?
Yeah, so one of the things that I found as I was, learning about about Carolina Gold rice is that while it was in sort of this comeback mode, the true history behind it was not also being relayed. And so what I felt was that, here's this grain that has such a significant impact on this state, on the South, et cetera. And I felt like people weren't talking about it enough for my liking. And so I felt like, if I develop this spirit, because I'm developing this spirit, I have to educate people about this rice, about the people that originally cultivated this rice. And so that is like the underlying mission behind everything is, how do I appropriately, lift this culture up? And so, when I was learning that folks were starting to use Carolina Gold rice again, it was a lot of chefs, and I didn't see anybody really in spirits there are, like you said, about a handful of people doing American rice spirits. There are a few more people doing Asian style rice spirits in America, but there's really only a handful of people doing American style rice spirits, which I consider that sort of American whiskey style. And charging buku buck for for Carolina Gold rice dishes on menus and not giving any credit to where this grain has come from. It was mind boggling. And so then I felt like, oh, so my people are losing again. And I just couldn't have that. And I took an enthusiasm that I already had for whiskey, a desire to move back towards being a creative after being very much not in aerospace and defense, and create something that allowed me to build my people up.
Now, for my last question, I want to zoom out and look at the grand vision that you have for Siwani Enterprises. What's the big goal? What's the big vision? What does it mean to be a technologist, as you said, who is switching over to a more creative field?
So I want to use Siwani spirits as sort of the subject zero for Siwani Labs. So anything that I build in Siwani Labs will be used for Siwani spirits first. And ultimately, what I want to be able to do is provide those products to communities to help raise them up, to allow small businesses to be able to be more successful and to grow within their local communities, and without having to rely on dollars that would have them compromise their IP or physical property. What I will do is offer education as well. So I used to be a science teacher. I was a science, yeah. I ran a science program at a small elementary school here in Maryland, called Holy Family School. And I ran their science program for kindergarten through 8th grade and revamped the whole thing and all of that. And so there's a large part of me that wants to create a situation in which I can come back to that as well. So I would like to do more STEM programs through Siwani Labs. I think there's even opportunity for STEM programs through spirits, although you have to be careful. But obviously, there's chemistry there, there's biochemistry there. And so there's a natural opportunity to come full circle with all of this, and combine all of my passions into one super enterprise.
That sounds super exciting. Camylle, it's been an honor chatting with you today. It kind of breezed by really fast, but we've all learned so much about Siwani, about Carolina Gold Rice, and the Gullah Geechee people, and I appreciate you stopping by Seasoned Fighters. But before we head out, can you please tell the folks watching at home, what are you working on these days, and where can we find and support you?
Yeah, so right now we are in the process of bottling and releasing our newest batch of Siwani Clue, which is our whiskey. And we are looking at also building a much larger project for release around our 5th anniversary, which will be next year, 2027. And releasing another very nice specialty whiskey for y'all. And in the interim, you can find me at www.siwanispirits.com or at Siwani Spirits on Instagram.
All right, everybody. That is the final bell. Thanks for being in our corner. Don't forget to follow Camylle and Siwani Spirits all over social media. We'll add links in the description. And be sure to check out the recipe for this peach and thyme old fashioned, or grab a bottle of two of the Carolina Gold whiskey. And we will see you for another round. Peace.
Cheers, y'all.